We have spent a good bit of time developing the idea of, of GDP as our primary measure of how much output is produced in the economy during the year. We need to, before we move on, let you know that there are some limitations to GDP. It is not a perfect measure of what we would like to measure. We'd like to have a measure of everything that affects our well-being, everything that makes us better off or worse off. GDP measures a lot of things that we value, things that affect us, but it's not a perfect measure of everything that affects our well-being. For example, remember that GDP includes the market value of all final goods and services produced during the year. It includes only those things that are produced and sold in markets. So anything that doesn't go through a market is not going to be included. Well, what would be some examples of non-market production? Let's say your car needs an oil change, and you go to Walmart, you pay them $25 to change your oil. Think about what happens there and how it's reflected in GDP. You're paying $25 for a service that is being provided, so that will be included in GDP. It will count as consumer spending. It will add to GDP. It will be reported as something valuable that was produced. And that's exactly how it should be. But what happens if you are a mechanic and you say, I'm not going to pay Walmart to change my oil, I'll take it home, I'll do it myself. Well, if you change your own oil and you do just as good a job as Walmart would have done, probably better, is that going to add to GDP? Do you pay yourself $25 and then report that to the government? Obviously not. So if you provide that service for yourself, even though it's worth just as much as if you had paid someone else to do it, it's not going to show up in GDP. Let's say you have 5 kids. If you stay home and take care of those children, you're providing valuable child care services to your family. But you don't pay yourself for doing that and then report that to the government. So the value of those services that you provide for your family will not show up in GDP. On the other hand, if you say, I can't stand being home with the kids all day, I'm going to go get a job and I'll pay someone else to take care of my kids. Well, when you pay them to provide that service for you, that is a market transaction, and so it will be included. The same service is being provided, child care, whether you do it or whether you pay someone else to do it for you. The problem is if you pay someone to do it, it will be included in GDP. If you provide it for yourself, it will not be included. Is there any way to include the value of these non-market produced goods? Probably not. We're not saying that the government should change the way they calculate GDP. We're simply pointing out that we do need to be aware that there are some things that affect our well-being that are not going to show up in GDP. GDP is a pretty good measure of the market value of the goods and services that are produced and sold through markets. Other problems with GDP. Leisure time. At around 1900, the average work week was about 53 hours a week. By the end of World War II, it was down to around 40 hours a week. Now it's around 35 hours. What does that mean? Well, it means we have more leisure time than people did 100 years ago. Now, what do we mean by leisure time? Well, economists by leisure time mean the time that you spend away from your market activity, away from your job. People today have more leisure time than 100 years ago. We value that leisure time. The more leisure time we have, the better off we are. But in calculating GDP, does the government say, okay, well, people had an extra 5 hours of leisure time, so that's worth so many dollars per hour, so we'll add that into our measure of GDP? No, they certainly don't do that. So we need to be aware that over time, as the work week changes, as the amount of leisure time that we have changes, that is something that affects our well-being, but it's not going to be reflected in GDP. Other problems, GDP does not reflect adequately improved product quality. In, I think it was 1983, I bought my first computer, paid $1,500 for it. In 2009, I bought my last computer. I paid $300 for it. Which one do you think was better? Obviously, the 2009 netbook that I got for $300 was a whole lot better, dramatically better than the 83 computer. But in 83, that computer added $1,500 to GDP. My netbook in 2009 added only $300, even though it was a much better product. So when we have improvements in product quality, that is a complication. It makes us better off, but it is not adequately reflected in GDP. Another problem is the underground economy.